underway here in just a moment. I'm with you. I don't want to say there's correlation, but here we are. What else could it be?
I don't know.
Yeah. Jim Davis looks like he's ready to start things off, and he will fire away with a Temple of Enlightenment to start our elimination round. You see he does already have a copy of End Hostilities in his hand, a great card in this particular matchup, a great card against white-blue Heroic. Jim gonna leave that card on top. He'll pass the turn back over to Ross. Ross with the Plains, and that is a favorite hoplite to get the party started.
Now, Jim's removal besides his End Hostilities is not very efficient for the matchup. We know that Blue-White Heroic is very powerful at fighting against 3 and 4 mana removal spells. But End Hostilities, that's a unique challenge.
The boss for turn number 2, we'll see what he can put together. First things first, just a boring old attack here for 1. Davis going to go down to 19. See if Tom has some sort of nice follow-up here.
And it's really tough to play one threat at a time sort of deal against the blue-white control deck because they can have little pieces of spot removal along the way. So Tom's got to be able to deploy multiple threats early on without leaving himself helpless against End Hostilities, and that's a very challenging thing to do.
Well, there's a Battle-Wise Hoplite. So just getting creatures into play to start. No Ordeal of Thassa's or any of that stuff here. Jim may have a copy of a card like Nullify in his hand. He may want to counter this, maybe not. Also, Last Breath available. So we'll see how Jim wants to use his cards, but he will just draw a card at this point. So nothing doing here for Davis.
And maybe want to be pretty conservative with his spot removal. If he feels like he's going to have to End Hostilities on turn 5, one way or the other, it makes a lot of sense to just counter critical spells, End Hostilities on the 5th turn, and then use your spot removal to fight over Tom's follow-up.
Let's see what the 3rd land is going to be here for Jim.
But Jim does have to be pretty cautious about how he plays this, because he has to kind of play a little bit like, I had to not only beat what's in play right now, but the second wave of creatures, because Tom's going to be pretty careful about not overextending into End Hostilities if he can avoid it.
Jim going to sacrifice his Flooded Strand right now. Island or Plains is the question. And I'll go with an island.
Remember, a lot of pressure on both these players. This is win or go home right now.
Perhaps time for a divination, something of the like. And Jim gonna shred those sleeves.
A card to look out for in this matchup too, Tom has a main deck copy of Stubborn Denial. And if Jim leans too heavy on End Hostilities, and Tom is able to find his 1 main deck copy, it could be a way for Tom to steal game 1.
He's gonna go with a Banishing Light to take care of Battle-Wise Hoplite. And just a passing of the turn back to Ross. Ross will draw. You see he's got a Plains, God's Willing now as well. Looks like a couple of lands over there for Tom. And he thought about Hero Viros. And he'll tap it a little bit differently here. And now follow up with a copy of Stratus Walk, which will cantrip. Also a little heroic action. Jim gonna take a look. Stratus Walk, the text in that card doesn't really play a huge role in this matchup. It's not bad or anything, because you can fly over Elspeth tokens, but by and large doesn't have a huge role.
Heroic Ancient as well.
Sure.
Jim likes to block. This is just a good turn for Tom because Jim's shields are down, and there's no opportunity for Jim to untap and end Hostilities right now. So get a second threat into play a cantrip while Jim can't punish you for it, and move on with business.
You know, it's funny here. This is a much different world that we live in now with no 4-mana Wrath effects. There's a big difference.
And not only is there no 4-mana Wrath, but there's no Supreme Verdict either. There's no way that White-Blue Heroic would be remotely viable in a world where Supreme Verdict was in standard.
Yeah, that's true, as it is an uncounterable Wrath. Stubborn Denial does a nice job against a card like End Hostilities. We'll see if it does show up here in this game as a Defiant Strike's going to go after the hero. Trigger Heroic in there. Now he'll draw. The big question is, how much do you extend?
And on Jim's side of the table, do you respect the 1 copy of Stubborn Denial?
Good question.
Or do you just cast your End Hostilities next turn?
Well, here's an attack. I suppose this is the easy part, but you can see Ross's hand. You know, cards that play such a huge role for him in certain matchups, like God's Willing against this particular deck, because of and hostilities being around, it doesn't play a big role. I wouldn't be surprised if we make our way to the sideboard that maybe Tom sideboards that card out, because it just doesn't seem that great in this matchup, but we'll see. Getting a little ahead of ourselves as Davis is going to sacrifice Evolving Wilds to get a Plains.
It is true that Jim's configuration of removal here, he's the only one in the tournament with a deck like this. And it presents specific problems for White Blue Heroic.
This might be the dream pairing here for Davis. We'll see.
Oh, he's got to be thrilled.
Yeah. Davis with a draw. Again, we already know about hostilities. Looks like he picked up a copy of Radiant Fountain. He's going to play that. Now, this is the question. Does he fire this off now, or will he wait? He will not wait. It's 10 hostilities, daring Ross to have a card like a Johnny's Presence or Stubborn Now. He does not, and those creatures will get cleared away.
You could see the look on Jim's face, too, of, you know, the way his body language was. If you got it, you got it. But he's not going to play around it here.
You'll have to worry about that for the sideboarded games. There's a Plains off of Flooded Strand. The House of Cards is crumbled down here for the boss. He's got some real work to do.
And I like not waiting, because if you allow Tom to untap there, he's probably going to get his creatures to be, at least one of them, to be 4 power. And at that point, Stubborn Denial is just a hard counter against spells. So even though it looks like Jim took a risk, you know, if the Stubborn Denial is there, he can't really play around it.
Tranquil Cove will come down. There's no creature there for Ross. Davis has to be even more thrilled as he'll play a Tranquil Cove and just pass the turn back. And here's the thing about this take on blue-white control. This one, very counterspell heavy. Jace's Ingenuity will be cast. The window wide open for Davis to draw 3 cards. And if you're Jim, this is how you want every game to go.
Oh, this is great.
Look how easy this is. I wrapped them, and now I'm drawing cards. He doesn't have any creatures on the board. I got a handful of counterspells. Just drew a copy of Dig Through Time. This is a dream come true.
Removal spell on 3.
Yep.
Sweeper on 5. Card draw on 6. Say go on turn 7.
Tom going to sacrifice some land, go get an island out of his deck. But he's in some big trouble now. Ordeal of Thassa the draw. The boss will just play a Plains and pass the turn back. Another copy of Jace's Ingenuity. That's going to resolve. 3 cards coming here for Davis yet again.
And this is the perfect summary of the problems of the game 1. You see an end hostilities in Jim's graveyard, a bunch of creatures in Tom, and then a bunch of creature enchantments and protection effects in Tom's hand.
Jim does have a land to play, and he will go with Temple of Enlightenment. Top card to dissolve. It seems difficult to pass that one up, and Jim will not.
There's only so many cards that matter at this point out of Tom's deck. The counter spells that Jim draws probably lock the game up.
And Ross is just going to pass the turn back. Davis, will he cast a copy of Dig Through Time? He will not. He'll just draw his Dissolve.
He knows that he's likely to discard a hand size anyway, so I think that he wants to counter something before casting any of his card drawers.
Temple of Enlightenment here from Ross. So he'll do a little scry action. Top card's going to go to the bottom. Some players do get a little impatient with, okay, I've got this game basically sewn up. Now I just need to find a win condition. So let me dig through time and try to find an Elspeth or a Pearl Lake Ancient. But Jim has displayed while playing this blue-white control deck that he is nothing but patient.
No reason to rush.
Does have a Radiant Fountain he could play. He could also play a Divination this turn if he'd like to. He'll just play Radiant Fountain, gain 2 life. And I imagine as we make our way through this game and the next one, you know, Radiant Fountain, Tranquil Cove, their ability to gain life will play a role in this matchup.
We've seen Jim do a lot of work against aggressive decks with those lands. I remember at the Invitational last week, he played against Mono Red later in the tournament, and the lands were a critical part of him winning that match.
And Divination. 2 cards coming here for Jim. Looks like he picked up 2 lands. One of them was a Tranquil Cove. Curious how many cards Ross has in his hand. It's quite a few, but you have to have the idea that they're not too relevant at this point. Davis looking at a copy of Last Breath. That one's going to go to the bottom.
I like putting the Last Breath on the bottom there. If Tom draws a creature, it's unlikely Last Breath is going to be able to do very much because Tom's hands, he has a lot of cards in it. It's likely he's going to be able to trigger Heroic with something and invalidate the Last Breath.
Tom Straw looks to be a Plains. See if he wants to play this one. He will just pass the turn back. Davis considering casting Dig now. And he can do it safely with a lot of mana because, hey, I don't have to worry about Stubborn Denial, and I can even pay it anyway. So Jim will take a look at the top 7, select 2 of them. Again, he's just looking for a win condition at this point. Be it Elspeth or his Pearl Lake Ancient. Either will work just fine. A replacement Dig Through Time is probably okay too.
But no rush. I mean, if he finds a win condition, great, but I don't think he's going to spend a lot of energy drawing cards if he doesn't have to. The pace of the game favors Jim. I mean, we're close to 99% territory here, or above.
And if you're Tom, you have to do anything that you can in the next game to just keep him off balance. Stubborn Denial will play a huge role in that, along with this some of the other options, that he does have in his sideboard. But things have not come together very well, and you've got an opponent discarding Devouring Light against you. You can't feel good as there's a Tranquil Cove.
Not a good sign if Jim's hand's good enough to be discarding removal spells against you.
Yeah, casting Dig Through Times and discarding as well. It is a horrible sign as there's another Dig Through Time. You see, he's just saying, look, I just want a win condition so we can wrap this up. Quick update for you guys on our other backup elimination match. Chris Van Meter currently up a game over Derek Sheets. Van Meter playing Jeskai Token, Sheets on Abzan Reanimator. Davis will select 2 cards.
And I believe Jim has found a copy of Elspeth.
Well, it's about time. That's the only missing piece of this puzzle.
We're approaching the point where the cards from the first Dig Through Time are going to be draw steps soon. He's looked at so many cards.
There's a Plains. He'll slide some mana around. And now here's Elspeth, Sun's champion. Tom, shrug. You're not going to get any emotion out of him.
All these body language from Jim suggests, he's kind of implicitly asking, do you want to keep playing this? Or
yeah. Well, he knows he's got him beat at this point. Ross will draw. Copy of Hero Viros.
Woohoo!
Right on time.
Creature.
That creature, chances of that resolving seems slim. Well, we will see. 3 soldier tokens in there for the Elspeth. Jim with multiple copies of Nullify in hand, it looks like. Dissolve. Just trying to figure out what counterspell he wants to use. He will go with Nullify. That'll take care of that.
I like using a counter because if nothing else, he's at risk of discarding a hand size. So.
Yeah. You actually just want to get some cards out of your hand at this point. There's no reason to get too fancy or cute. Dig Through Time number 3. Take a look at the top 7. Choose 2 of them. See a Dissolve, and it looks like Jason's Ingenuity will be the selection.
Sure.
Even Jim is just like, yeah, those look good. I'll take those. He's going to untap a large mass of land and take a draw. Polluted Delta. There's an attack for 3. 3 more soldier tokens incoming here in just a moment. It's no Sphinx's Revelation. This deck doesn't have that, but Dig Through Time sure does feel close sometimes. There's a Seeker of the Way. Yeah, nullify that one too.
It's not a win condition onto its own, something like Dig Through Time, but it is still a very efficient, powerful card drawer, especially for a deck that has a lot of high-impact things to find, like Elspeth, Pearl Lake Ancient, Dissolve in certain spots.
Davis going to get in for 6 points of damage here. Elspeth will take up 3 more soldier tokens to be coming into play. Ross looks like he's going to get 1 more draw step, a copy of Battlewise Hoplite. He'll cast it. Davis, I have a feeling, will counter it, but we'll see, given that he does have an Elspeth ultimate kind of at the ready, and he says, I will dissolve. And that is going to do it. Jim Davis is going to win game number 1 here over Tom Ross. Blue-white control up a game over white-blue heroic. As we will turn our attention to the sideboard here, and we will start with the boss. What does he have available?
3 copies of Stubborn Denial in Aqueous form and Ajani's Presence, 2 copies of Glare of Heresy, 2 Laguna Band Trailblazer, 1 copy of Treasure Cruise, a Dig Through Time, Mortal Obstinacy, Triton Tactics, and a 2nd copy of Ordeal of Heliod. The 3 counter spells, the 3 copies of Stubborn Denial, really important here. You saw what kind of problems and hostilities caused for Tom. He needs some counter spells to shore that up a little bit. I think the 1 copy of Ajani's Presence will come in for similar reasons. The Treasure Cruise and the Dig Through Time, some sources of card advantage if the game goes long. And some copies of Glare of Heresy I think are fine to bring in as an answer to Elspeth and Banishing Light.
Other side of things here for Davis, 2 Omen Speakers, 2 Erase, a Faded Retribution, a Last Breath, 3 Negates, 3 Bramaz. Yikes. think there's something else here, too. Man, he's got good options in the sideboard for this matchup. He also, oh, my goodness. He's got 2 Glare Heresies and a Whelming Wave, too. Oh, boy. Well, 2 Erase is a pretty easy place to start. I actually like the additional copy of Last Breath. If you want another Wrath Effect, Fate Retribution is pretty expensive, but Wrath Effects are really good in this matchup. I think you can make an argument for the 3 Negates. I like the Glare of Heresies, obviously, as the creatures are white. And then the Whelming Wave, you might even be able to do that, too.
Yeah, I actually like the Negates more than the copies of Erase. And you may wonder, well, why the deck has so many enchantments in it. It's because a lot of the enchantments don't stick around for very long, or it's just about getting a heroic trigger anyway. So the counter spells are a little bit more helpful, I feel like.
Yeah, you see Jim is pulling out a lot of cards and moving a lot of cards in. So while he finishes doing that, we will, of course, talk about one of our newer announcements. We've got our chat back, and if you're watching on twitch.tv/SCG Live, you probably noticed.
Yeah, join the feature match area now. Slow mode free chat. Without the subscription, you can only post once every 2 minutes. With the subscription, post as much as you want. Custom emoticons and badges, and only $4.99 a month. We have those emoticons actually available here. 2 smiling commentators and 1 not as happy, alongside our penguin and our slow play turtle.
It looks to me as though there's only one unhappy thing there. Everyone else seems to be pretty happy. I mean, the turtle, it's maybe debatable, but I think that's a happy turtle face.
I would say that the turtle's intent is unclear. It could be very happy or about to kill something.
But we're clear with you are just
so exhausted. You know what I
haven't
mean?
had the cup of coffee yet.
I've not had a cup of coffee.
Maybe I've said something to rile you up that you're not happy about. Maybe the New Jersey bashing. Not quite sure, but generally displeased.
Contemplating the fate of humanity.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's fine.
A lot of things going on.
Yeah. Just got done watching the Fast and Furious 7 trailer, and that's the look on your face.
Yep.
It's going to be a great movie, by the way.
But you and Matthias look blissfully unaware, so it's a good contrast.
Well, I love what I do.
Yeah.
I do, and I'm all smiles.
I love what I do, too.
Couldn't tell by that picture.
It's true.
Well, Jim Davis is
So
going
it
to
goes.
take a short break here, so we'll take a look at what he's accomplished. 30 years old from Long Island, New York. Magic player, content producer for SCG on the select side. Top 8-point earner. Got an at-large bid. Solidified things at our Season 4 Invitational. He's got 5 Open Series top 8s, 2 Invitational top 8s. And you see the things that he's known for playing Control decks in Standard recently.
And if you go back to last year, at the point where Abrupt Decay was becoming very popular in Standard, he was the first one we really had in a high-profile tournament pull the trigger on playing no copies of Detention Sphere, and instead playing with Planar Cleansing and other board sweepers.
He's one of the players that has shown you that, through the IQ series, you can get to the Players' Championship. I know that we made the announcement last year at our Vegas Invitational about, hey, we're going to make this Open Series thing kind of crazy with the Players' Championship and a payoff tournament. It's just, well, can I do it through IQs? And he's shown that, yeah, you can. He's got 15 IQ top 8, 6 IQ wins, and a Super IQ win.
You got to supplement it a little bit with some success on the Open Series, although we have some players like Logan Mize and Jim Davis who have done the lion's share of their work through the IQ circuit.
So we understand that some players can't travel a ton. Jim's actually pretty busy given that he's a teacher as well, so he doesn't have as much time to play as most people do. So, he is a Magic player and a content producer, but he's also got a real life outside of Magic, and this was a way for him to keep up with things, and he definitely got the job done with 15 IQ top 8s. As we turn our attention to the boss, and, well, we know how he qualified.
Yep. All the invitational wins.
This guy is not messing around. 31 from Baton Rouge, but from what I've been told, we'll be moving to the Roanoke area very soon.
That's exciting.
If you liked Tom Ross and his Only Versus video that he did with Brad Nelson, maybe a little spoiler alert there. More things to come on the premium side of Star City Games. Season 2 and a Season 3 Invitational Champion. His results really speak for himself. One heck of a deck designer.
It's a seller's market for the skills of Tom Ross.
It really is.
So I'm glad that he's going to Roanoke soon. It was only a matter of time, but I'm glad it's official.
Yeah, I mean, he's just living and breathing Magic. He took a little bit of a break away from the game. I like to call this the break for real life stuff to see what you want to do, but we all know. You come back. You just do. You come back, and he's come back in a way that not many really have.
You can never quit. You can have a hiatus. You can take the occasional sabbatical, but no one quits. That's not a thing. I
was able to quit in air quotes for 7 months before I just realized that I hate everything and this is all that I want to do.
I think that my longest stretch was probably, I had 2 different 9-month stretches. From Stronghold to Urza's Saga / Urza's Legacy, that was a break, and most of Lorwyn block. That's it.
My break was during, incidentally, I took maybe what one could argue is the best break. It was during the Callblade era.
Not a bad time.
was when I was not playing.
That's when I got back in the mix.
Yeah. And I actually played in a Call Blade Standard PT because I had the weekend off of work, and wow, was I embarrassing myself turn after turn. That deck was so powerful, it was ridiculous, and I had no idea how to harness the power.
But that doesn't really matter that much.
Fair. Favorite hot play is how Tom's going to start things off. At one point, Jace, the Mind Sculptor, and Stoneforge Mystic were standard legal cards that you could play side by side.
And Batterskull.
That too.
Perhaps a slight overshoot on RMP's part.
A Temple of Enlightenment at a tack for 1 will bring Davis down to 19, and it's a backup favorite hoplite and a passing of the turn. Looks a little similar to what Ross did in the previous game, but again, his deck gets better after sideboard.
The 4 copies of Stubborn Denial, that's a real game changer.
Yeah.
Now Tom can be a lot more liberal about deploying his threats early, trying to push enchantments onto them, and he can keep Jim off of his big sweeper.
Davis is going to play an island before passing the turn back. This represents quite a few things, Counter Magic being one, Last Breath being another. But he'll set his hand down on the table right now. We'll see what Ross is able to put together. You see he does have a copy of Seeker of the Way, Defiant Strike, but he'll start just attacking here for 2 points of damage. Was curious if Jim was going to bring in a card like Bermaz, King of Oreskos, and he does have one in his hand right now. There's a Seeker of the Way. See if this resolves. Looks like it might.
I think part of the reason that Jim wants Bermaz in the matchup is because his end hostilities is not as safe as it is game 1 because he's playing against 4 copies of Stubborn Denial. Now he is also playing against 2 copies of Glare of Heresy. That can be really problematic if that comes up. But on the balance, probably better to lower your curve a little bit and have some impactful creatures and not spells.
There's a Plains there for Davis. Will he go with Bermaz? He also has Divination and Banish Knight. Looks like he's going to play something on his main phase here. Sacrificing Flooded Strand very quickly. And what is he looking to dig out of his deck? There's the Plains. So it seems like a Bermaz might be where we're headed.
Though Bermaz has some of its own trouble in the matchup. The most obvious scenario is Tom has Glare of Heresy, and then Jim's pretty far behind. The other situation is Tom just untaps, says declare attackers, and pushes everything in. Are you going to make a block there? A lot of things can go wrong.
Well, we'll see how things do shake out very soon here, as the King of Oreskos is on the table. And Tom with his 3 creatures, though he didn't play a land last turn, picked up a favorite hoplite for the draw this turn. Yep, red zone.
Yup.
I mean, and he has to. Now, to Tom's credit, I think he would have done this no matter what he drew for the turn because he's almost forced into it. But this is how Tom plays too.
You definitely can't say go or just
Yep.
play another creature.
Yep.
So even if Tom has nothing, I think he's compelled to make this attack.
Make him think you have something. Now it's on Davis to figure out how to block. There's a lot that can go wrong. You see, Tom does have Defiant Strike at the ready.
And everything is so tough to block here because the favorite hoplites, it gives Tom some insurance policy that even if he can't push through Bermaz, he can simply prevent all the damage. And the Seeker of the Way is very easy to get to 4/4 from this spot.
Well, there is a Defiant Strike on favorite hoplite very, very quickly. Doesn't look like Jim did any blocking here. So just a bunch of damage is going to be forced through. Saw prowess on Seeker of the Way as well. The question is, does Tom have a land? It doesn't look like he does. Just looks like a copy of God's Willing.
And I think part of the reason that Jim said no blocks here is because he has Devouring Light in his hand. So it gets him a spot next turn where he can attack, make another play, and hold up Devouring Light very easily with his Bermaz and the Bermaz token. So he can force a block next turn, which will cause Tom to play over the top, and then Devouring Light can be very powerful.
There's just so much that can go wrong if Jim elects to block there if he blocks the wrong creature. And Bermaz, he feels, is more valuable than that. Once he has mana available, then Bermaz gets really good. So he takes a shot on the chin, goes down to 9. You see Ross at 23, but the boss's life total doesn't matter all that much in this matchup. It's just Jim's job not to die. And if you're rooting for Tom Ross, you want him to kill Jim as fast as he possibly can.
Yeah, once you get to turns, 5, you're looking at end hostilities. Turn 6, you're looking at Elspeth.
And there's a card that can play such a big role in the matchup. Radiant Fountain. It's a land drop, and it gains 2 life. Davis is going to go up to 11.
It's a subtle part of these control decks, but it's a critical part. I don't think the aggressive matchups would be palatable if you didn't have access to Tranquil Coves, Dismal Backwaters, if you're blue-black, and the Radiant Fountains.
Banishing Light. And this is such a good turn for Jim because he's able to play a removal spell. He's able to attack here, get in these points of damage, and have Devouring Light at the ready due to Convoke.
And because Vermass is so big in relation to Tom's creatures, if Tom makes an attack, he has to play something. Then Jim can respond with his Devouring Light. So it forces Tom to have 2 tricks, which is asking a lot when Tom's only on 2 lands.
Devouring Light's not a card we see a lot of in this format, but it certainly is going to play a role in this game. Convoke, very, very powerful in this situation. Tom drew a card for the turn. It was a copy of a Johnny's Presence. And if this were a game about end hostilities, it would play a huge role, but then again, Jim is only 1 mana away from end hostilities.
It really speaks to the value of having a diversity of types of answers in your deck when you're playing against white-blue heroic. If you're all in on sweepers, then a Johnny's Presence can be problematic. If you're all in on pinpoint removal, then the God's Willing effects can be really tough. Even the Exile clause on Devouring Light is significant here because of a Johnny's Presence. There's a lot to like about the diversity of removal that Jim has access to.
It just seems like a kind of an uphill climb for the boss to get through this matchup.
Because Tom also has to make a determination at this spot. Am I willing to concede to end hostilities? That's step 1. Because it's hard for him to push through Bermaz and leave up enough defense. Once he's made that determination, then it's what tricks can I afford to play around here? Jim is bringing a bunch of different problematic cards to the table.
Well, Jim's ready to do some blocking. The question is, how does he want to go about doing it? He's got his cat token. And he's got the King of Oreskos. He'll have another cat token here in just a moment, so long as he does remember the trigger. And it looks like he's coming to a decision now, as the Lion King is going to go in front of that boring old favorite hoplite. And the cat token, maybe a Seeker of the Way, as it is just a 2/2 right now, could deal the most damage potentially.
And I think Jim is trying to lay a block here where it looks like he has nothing, where he's feigning a lot of weakness. This is about the most conservative block available to Jim.
I think so, yeah.
So I think part of this is trying to get Tom to do something so this Devouring Light gets turned on. The flip side of this block may cause Tom to just say, okay, I'll pass. I'll put your cat token in as the first blocker. My hoplite will trade with that. You'll take 2. You have a chump block.
There's just so much, what makes the situation so interesting, there's so much for each player to think about. If you're Tom, it's, okay, what does Jim have in his hand? What is he trying to set up? Is he trying to trick me? Does he have any hostilities? And what can I bluff? If you're Jim, you're playing against Tom, and Tom has 2 mana available, and that could represent so many different things. The players would think about so many different situations at this point and cards that they have to worry about. And Tom, again, not willing to make a move.
Taking a very conservative approach here. But this is a victory for Jim because he's happy with that turn just getting replayed. Tom did very little and lost a creature. So if Tom's going to be that conservative, all right, that's good for Jim. He can just keep attacking with Bermaz. Tom's not really in a position to do very much.
If Jim has another Radiant Fountain or a Tranquil Cove, then he's not getting anywhere.
Yeah. All the while, he's making land drops. He's setting himself up to be able to play multiple spells in a turn. He's not playing into Stubborn Denial. So I really like the tactic that Jim took last turn. Just make a very conservative block. If Tom does something about it, great, you have an answer. And if not, okay, you just get to run this turn back.
And we do have our update for you guys. We will not be jumping to a backup match because Chris Van Meter, our Season 2 point leader, just did defeat Derek Sheets 2-0. Jeskai Tokens takes down our Season 1 Invitational champion. And for Derek Sheets, his tournament is over.
Congrats and condolences. Very impressive that he played in exactly one tournament this year in the Open Series and was able to qualify for the Players' Championship. I don't know if we're ever going to see that again, but an 0-4 performance and a quick exit.
Divination will resolve here. Davis draws 2 cards. You see he does have a Radiant Fountain as a land drop, if that's the one that he wants to make. Looks like he might be going Tranquil Cove, so he's up to 10. But either one is just devastating.
The argument there for playing the other one is it allows him to have access to Devouring Light and pay for Stubborn Denial. But because I feel like that's unlikely enough to really matter this turn, Jim would rather just get the comes into play tap land out of his hand now because he's a little tight on mana.
Rosh, you have to imagine, has Devouring Light on his radar. Now, a lot of people don't play Blue-White Control, but Jim Davis, coming off of the top 4 at the Season 4 Invitational last weekend, you take a look at deck lists and options coming into the tournament, and chances are that Tom is going to play White-Blue Heroic anyway, but that information that Jim did provide about, hey, this is what my deck looks like, these are the cards that you have to be worried about. You have to imagine that's a card that's on the radar along with all the other tricks that this deck can play. But he's trying to do a really nice job of masking Devouring Light as being an option here. Here's an attack with just a Seeker of the Way.
Tom really needs to land number 3. Because he's
in a
sitting
bad way.
He's sitting on lines of play like Ordeal of Thassa with Ajani's Presence backup, which is attractive. And he just can't take that big of a risk right now because all of his really proactive plays require him to tap out. And then Devouring Light or End Hostilities on the way back might end the game.
In the last game, he needed it really bad. He needed to draw action. This game, he needs to draw lands. He's looking for the perfect mix, and he hasn't been able to find it thus far.
Well, Jim's demanding a lot out of Tom's draws. He's saying you need to have early pressure, you need to have some tricks to get through Bermaz, you need to have some protection effects to beat Banishing Lights and Devouring Lights, and you also need to beat End Hostilities. It's demanding a lot.
And there's a block. Cat token in front of Seeker of the Way. And now here's Devouring Light, or at least an attempt. And Tom is going to let his Seeker of the Way go very quickly. And Tom is just going to pass the turn back, not even deploy Battle-Wise Hoplite. Very interesting.
Well, if he plays the other creature out of his hand, it's essentially a concession to End Hostilities.
Yeah. I mean, you're killing a Bermaz. You're getting off the table. And truth be told, Bermaz might be the bigger problem than End Hostilities at this point. It's really messing things up. The ability for Jim to just continuously say, attack for 3, get a 1 out of the deal and start chump blocking, or just make attacking really difficult for Ross. I mean, End Hostilities is going to be a problem no matter what. It's a tough decision.
No, I agree. I mean, it's going to be challenging for Tom to beat that card anyway, I feel like, because Bermaz is almost forcing an overextension by itself.
Tom going to block here. Jim will pass priority. Here's a copy of Johnny's Presence. Jim wants to take a look. What exactly does this do? Well, one thing it does is trigger Heroic, I'll tell you that much.
Now, Jim perhaps contemplating a response with Last Breath.
So you do see the Strive common. Any number of target creatures get +1/+1 and gain indestructible until end of turn. Jim looking at Devouring Light now. So Heroic trigger will resolve. Favorite Hoplite is still alive. See if Tom wants to make a move here or not, or if Jim wants to make a move. The Convoker Devouring Light's so powerful. The ability for Jim, for example, to convoke and then leave up counter magic, it's unbelievable.
Though I will say, unless Jim is really trying to lay a specific trap, I think that he should not have allowed the Presence to resolve, because now Tom has a 4-power creature in play. Yeah. And Stubborn Denial is now a hard counter. I don't know where we are in the stack. It's possible there's still a response here, but
here's Devouring Light. God's Willing is going to counter that. So now Tom wins that fight.
That is step one.
Yes, it is. Permass is off the table. Now you got to get through those stinking cat tokens. And it looks like Tom may have forgotten to scry with his God's Willing. We'll see what happens here. See head judge Jared Silva. He will step in and make his ruling.
This is really important, too, because Tom is in need of land number 3 in a bad way.
Yeah, one could argue in the worst way. It looks like Tom won't get the scry. Something you rarely see him miss.
There is a lot of pressure riding on this match.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom's got to win this game and the next game just to not be eliminated. And this might be the worst matchup in the pool that he could have drawn.
Is it Radiant Fountain time here for Davis? He'll start with the dig through time.
And part of the reason that Jim wants to do this now is because Stubborn Denial has become a hard counter.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jim's hand might be a little light right now on meaningful cards.
A lot of options.
Elspeth among them, too.
Pretty good one in this matchup.
Just going to induce more out of Tom. Has to keep playing to the board.
The ruling with the scry, by the way, is too much time had passed that instance. And the game rules violation does stand. So no scry from the God's Willing. There's a Temple of Enlightenment. Jim will scry with that. We'll see if he wants to do anything. So put that card to the bottom. And I'll just pass the turn back over to Ross. Ross has made it out of that turn with a large creature, land number 3, sitting on top of his deck. If he'd gotten the chance to scry, I imagine he would have left it on top anyway.
Yeah, no chance he's turning down an island here.
No. In comes favorite hoplite. 4-power creature. Will it be blocked as Davis is at 10?
And you still have to respect the possibility, you know, if you're Jim here, that Tom has left in some number of aqueous form type of cards. So even if you've selected Elspeth, there's no guarantee that it locks up the game. And in fact, if you tap out for Elspeth, it's likely you die if you take this hit.
There's your follow-up in Battle White's hoplite. Davis took the 4. He's down to 6. He'll untap. Time for him to draw. In Islands, what he's found, you see he's got a negate in his hand. We know about Radiant Fountain, 2 copies of that. So here's Radiant Fountain as he goes up to 8. Is it time to Windmill Slam and Elspeth? Is Windmill Slamming and Elspeth even good here?
It is pretty risky, but Jim's hand may not give him that many alternatives.
Those are all questions that Jim Davis is currently asking himself. And he's just going to pass the turn back with a bunch of mana available.
Just too risky.
I think it is.
Both these players showing a lot of respect for the other, what the other can do. Jim not tapping out for the Elspeth. Tom going through some pretty significant gymnastics here to not get blown out by a variety of tricks.
He really is. But, you know, Tom is someone who plays aggressive strategies so well that you do have to jump through some hoops when you're playing into control strategies, but he's shown over the course of this year on the Open Series and through his career that he is very skilled at doing this.
Like, look at that ordeal of Thassa in Tom's hand. It's been there for a little bit.
It would be very attractive.
He just knows that the coast just can't be clear. Jim's left too many cards. He has too much mana available. He needs to wait until Jim has some amount of shields down.
Hero of Iroas now, extending even a little further onto the board. Tom will pass. And again, that 1 mana can represent so much.
First of all, it represents Stubborn Denial, which Jim has to be really worried about. Second, even if Jim goes for it and then hostilities here, Tom can Ajani's presence to keep one of his creatures alive, untap, and then get the ordeal on something, draw some cards, and get back into it.
Potentially kill him.
Potentially kill him and gets him closer to the treasure cruise in any case.
Radiant Fountain's going to bring Davis up to 8.
Those lands have been doing work. Jim's at 8, and he has gained 7 life so far off of his lands.
Yeah, those lands are awesome. They're so good.
They're easy to overlook when you're looking at these deck lists, but it's a big part of what's going on here.
Jim tapping 6 mana. Tom immediately picks up his hand. Elspeth. Shrug, it's in. Will it go up or down? Make soldiers or maybe kill that favorite hoplite?
I don't think you can leave Tom with 2 creatures to your 1 blocker next turn.
Jim does have a copy of Negate in his hand. Elevator's going up, 3 soldiers.
If Jim has nothing to follow up to the board, he can't protect the Elspeth if he goes down. He has 1 token against two power creatures and the Elspeth at 1, so I can understand wanting to get one of the big creatures off the table, but I think Jim just has to do this.
The boss will draw. Perhaps now it's time for Ordeal of Thassa, as the situation looks as though it may have changed.
It's as shields down as it's going to get. Maybe Jim has a counter spell or an erase or something, but that's better than your creature getting killed in response.
There's your ordeal. Trigger the Scry on Battlewise Hoplite, as well as a +1/+1 counter. Assuming that Tom does want to Scry. Jim gonna take a look at the ordeal, make sure he knows exactly what can happen here because of this. So there's the die, here's the Scry. So if Tom Ross misses another Scry, I'm gonna be blown away. Another ordeal. Take a look here. Oh, 4 cards could be on the way.
And now Jim's in this weird spot where, you know, maybe he's happy with all this happening because he just untap and minus Elspeth, but you are giving Tom a lot of looks at cards.
No, that's a real risk. Here they come.
So now you got to ask yourself, if you're Jim, can I just overpower Tom's leftovers? Even if he gasses back up, does it just not matter as long as I keep Elspeth in play?
Especially because there's a treasure cruise that's going to kind of be online now too. Looks like Rosa is going to go to Elspeth. And those ordeals are going to trigger here momentarily, you have to imagine. Tom with the Johnny's presence left over in his hand right now too.
But potentially about to get a fresh grip of cards.
Jim with Negate in his hand still. So much to think about in this situation. He's in a good matchup. He's up a game. Doesn't want the clock to be a factor, though. That's what actually came back to bite him in his first match against Brian Baranduin. Ordeal number 2 is going to trigger. 2 cards.
I think part of the reason that this is happening is like this from Jim's side is if he tries to fight over one of the ordeals, if Tom simply finds a God's willing, he could die inside of combat.
Mm-hmm.
He can make Jim unable to block. Or potentially get the Elspeth off the table, which may be nearly as bad.
Looks like these soldier tokens had some blocking to do. They're all going to join in.
And Tom sending one hero of Iros at the Elspeth. Most likely, the reason being that if that hero connects, it means that the minus on Elspeth is turned off for next turn. And I think that's what Jim wants to get to most of all.
Yep. There's a Plains. Tom will pass the turn back. One thing he did not draw off of those 4 cards was an island or a blue source of mana like a Flooded Strand, as he did pick up a copy of Stubborn Denial, as Davis will draw a copy of Temple Enlightenment.
It's pretty awesome here for Jim that he does not have to respect the possibility of counter spells this turn. Makes this turn a lot easier.
Davis ticking down. There's a Johnny's Presence to save Battlewise Hoplite. At the very least, the boss will get a scry out of this. But he's trying to manipulate the situation in his favor. The scry from the heroic will resolve, but a Johnny's Presence will not. That's a negate. So that'll take care of that portion of the card. And there go the 2 big creatures. Elspeth's versatility is so important.
That's a huge win here for Jim, but if Tom is able to get to Elspeth, I think the rest of his hand, Jim's hand is very light. I think it's 2 lands and an erase.
That's it. Are we going back the boss's way? We might be. Yep, we are.
And as you look at the clock, you know, if we get to untimed turns, you got to figure like life totals is going to favor Tom.
Yeah. So Jim's pace of play coming back to hurt him a little bit. He is very methodical in his ways with blue-white control, but he's going to have to pick it up because he's already had 1 loss come as a result of life totals.
Game 1, I feel like he played pretty fast, but this has just been a much more complicated game.
Absolutely. Top card going to go to the bottom here for Ross. Saw him cast the God's Willing pretty quickly there. Make the hero a little bit bigger. Wants to know if the coast is clear to keep moving. See the Treasure Cruise and the Stubborn Denial in hand. A lot of cards in the graveyard now. Here's the attack. There goes Elspeth. Step 1 complete. And now he's going to go for a little cruise.
This is very impressive here because you would figure that Tom has an advantage in the short game, but not the long game. But he's hanging around here post-board.
Yeah, he's fighting. Jim's trying to hold him off, but Tom is certainly fighting right now. There's a Flooded Strand.
And don't overlook the Defiant Strike that Tom just picked up because that turns on the Stubborn Denial in his hand. He now has access to a hard counter.
At the 1-2 punch. Davis will draw a copy of Jason's Ingenuity. And I'm going to be very interested to see if Tom counters this. Does he sense the weakness?
I mean, Jim has had nothing for a couple turns.
Yeah.
He obviously drew this.
He's going to let it go. A couple of cards there for Davis. Glare of Heresy among them.
Tom might just be saying, I know you just don't have that many cards left in your deck that matter.
Glare of Heresy going to go after the hero. There's a God's Willing. That'll take care of that.
And that doesn't require any chicanery from Tom to have Stubborn Denial be a hard counter. It's just good to go now.
Protection from white, of course, will take care of the glare. Tom doing a little bit of math. That top card will become the bottom one. Davis will play a Flooded Strand, get in for a point of damage. Of course, the cat token does have Vigilance from Bramaz. And Davis will just pass the turn back over to Ross. Underneath 13 minutes here. The pressure is already immense, as this is an elimination match for these 2 players. But once you throw the clock in, then things really start to heat up.
And this has got to be especially stressful for Jim because won game 1 very easily. Looked like game 2 was solidly in his control as well. It looks like Tom might have the tools to sneak out of game 2 and then 12 minutes and counting. Not where Jim wants to be.
Ross very quickly sacrificing and searching with Flooded Strand. So he picked up a copy of Manic Influence for the turn. He willingly drew that 6th land. He scryed, he thought about it. Actually, he put the top card on the bottom, so I do take that back. The Manic Influence was just a random draw. So pardon me. Though the 6th land could be important as he does have a copy of Heliod's Pilgrim in hand, he'll start with the Ordeal.
And he can just sense a ton of weakness on Jim's side right now. He knows Jim had to have drawn that Jace's Ingenuity. He's had nothing going on for a couple turns.
Well, we've seen Tom so many times. As here's an erase. It's going to go after the Ordeal. We've seen Tom so many times with Infect and Legacy, for example, just know when to pick his spots. It's something he's so skilled at doing. And it looks like he's trying to make his move and pick his spot again right here. Here comes the hero.
And Jim finally able to use the erase. A card that I think is good but not great against White-Blue Heroic. A little overrated.
Jim is going to block. Tom going to play Heliod's Pilgrim. Trigger, he's going to search. We'll see exactly what he wants to dig out of his deck. It's another Ordeal if Thassa wants to keep that party going. He'll pass the turn back. Now, Davis does have a copy of Dig Through Time in his hand. He's going to go down to 7. And now the big question is, will Tom counter this or try to counter what comes after?
Chase's Ingenuity and Dig Through Time are two very different animals right now because Tom is worried about specific cards, not about raw card count. And so this is much more threatening than the Jace's Ingenuity. Tom elected not to counter last time, but this is a much more attractive counterspell target.
He's going to let it go. Ooh, wow. Did not expect that.
Well, he might be in a position where he feels like he needs to find something like End Hostilities plus Negate.
Well, taking a look at 7 cards allows you to get there.
But he's got a lot of draw steps that suddenly matter if you do counter there. I ultimately like not fighting over Jace's Ingenuity. I think if I'm in Tom's seat, I would have picked a fight over this.
I'm just so scared to Dig Through Time. 7 cards, so many. But the boss let it resolve. Davis, Glare of Heresy, and Jace's Ingenuity. He'll lead with the Glare, going after the hero. What is Ross willing to counter with Stubborn Denial?
And this is really problematic because now Stubborn Denial isn't even a counter.
I might let that resolve. Nope. He's going to Stubborn Denial it.
Yeah, that's the same Tom may have just had the same realization I had, which is if you let this resolve, now it's a free-for-all for Jim. You don't have a Ferocious trigger.
There's Ingenuity. 1, 2, 3 cards coming. Can Jim find an answer? Elspeth, Last Breath. I don't think he has what he's looking for. He has so many cards in his hand. You can see him. 4 of them are lands. 1 of them is an Elspeth. 1 of them is a Last Breath.
But Tom's still got to be willing to pull the trigger next turn on a lethal attack. He's a point short. He's got to play something else.
Pass the turn back. Ross will untap. It's time for him to draw a card. We know he has Defiant Strike and Ordeal of Thassa in his hand. He'll draw. Is he willing to make his move? He showed so much patience with his card so far, trying to figure out the best time to pick his spots.
I mean, he can diversify a little bit, put something on Heliod's Pilgrim. That way, in the case of one removal spell, he's not out of it.
It's a Pilgrim. It's going to resolve. Stratus Walk is what it'll go with. Now there is Stratus Walk on hero.
So this is a different sort of hedge. It allows him to apply lethal while still drawing a card.
Sure. Jim says, I have 5 cards in my hand. I dare you. Here they come. Jim's going to take a look at his hand. There's Last Breath to go after Heliod's Pilgrim. Tom needs something else. He has something else in Defiant Strike. Jim will look at his hand, and that's going to do it. We're heading to a third game between these two players, and you can see the clock right in the middle there. We're going to have about 7 minutes. Both these players are going to have to accelerate their pace of play here in a big way. All that bobbing and weaving in game number 2. And now for the boss, in what is a very difficult matchup. He's one game away from keeping his tournament going. Same can be said for Jim Davis.
And we're at a point here where Jim may need to contemplate doing some pretty radical sideboarding.
Yeah, again, at the end of the 5 turns, you know, the clock ends. You get 5 turns between the two players. Whoever has the highest life total wins. If they're tied, you go into sudden death, first life change. Now, clearly you don't want the games to come down to that. But coming in this tournament, all the players knew the rules coming in. And we saw the first match with Jim Davis. Brian Bronwyn ended the game at 35, and Jim was at 6. The game was still pretty close, but the rules of the tournament are what they are. And so Brian Bronwyn did get the win, and he's already heading on to Sunday competition. For Jim Davis, he now has his back against the wall, and his pace of play is going to need to be accelerated here.
For example, Omen Speaker kind of stinks in this matchup. Does not block very effectively. Not much of a clock. But given what the matchup looks like now, it's a card that may be valid for Jim to bring in. Because he needs to keep his life total high. He needs to be able to attack as well.
It's a different dimension.
Yes.
It really is.
A lot more emphasis on those life gain lands.
Boy, oh boy.
And on Tom's side, do you consider bringing something like the Laguna Band Trailblazer? Because you just need more stuff.
Potentially.
Do you have time for things like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time, which are normally very good in the matchup? What about Ordeal of Heliod? I'm just saying it's very different now.
Yeah, no.
The cards that for both of these players would be perhaps the first thing to get cut now might be some of their stronger cards in the matchup. There's probably enough time here where the players can mostly play a straight-up game, so we might not see anything too crazy, but it does change around how people sideboard.
Well, both players will lay out 7 cards. Jim Davis will be on the play. See if he likes what he sees. Same thing we said here for the boss. And Jim does not. He's going down to 6. Ross looks happy enough with his 7.
This would be a real tough way to go for Jim, because I thought game 2 was shaping up to be...
I thought he was going to win game 2.
I thought he had it.
I thought he was in a great spot. Tom navigated that game very, very well.
Yep. Being able to get out from under that Bermaz. I mean, Tom took the one line of play, I feel like, where he could have gotten Bermaz off the table.
Yeah. Not sure if Jim likes his 6.
But if you mulligan to 5, how are you supposed to win, either conventionally or on life totals?
Yeah. Against this deck? Start it up. Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. It's a dissolve, it looks like. It's maybe moving to the bottom.
I think Jim needs to approach this game with mulligan standards that are looser than Gerard's.
That's tough.
Yep.
Temple here. Pass it back over to Davis. Davis will draw. Bermaz.
That's the one card that he has in his list that gives him a real good chance of being able to win a game if it comes down to that sort of damage race.
Here's an island. And now there's a hero. Pass the turn back. Over to Davis. Davis will draw. Does he have a plains? He's got a Delta. He's got a Radiant Fountain. He does not have a white source. Just a passing the turn over to Ross. Ross with the plains. There's an attack for 2. Davis will go down to 18. Tom has to figure out exactly how far he wants to extend. There's Battle Wise Hoplite. And now favorite Hoplite, so he's willing to make a move. Davis going to sacrifice, go down to 18.
Sensing a little bit of weakness here on top of that, you know, What is Tom going to do with a 1-2 as a leftover? Probably
Yeah.
not that much.
Down to 17 now as the boss. Excuse me, as Davis. Davis, Radiant Fountain back up to 19. We're all even up. But no double white mana here for Jim. Ross will draw a card. It's an island.
And I think that Tom might have been able to sniff out that Jim was missing double white last turn, because Jim would definitely want to represent Devouring Light if he could.
Yeah.
So if he's missing a white mana, he's probably not bluffing.
Scry here for Battle White's Hoplite. Gonna leave it on top, and the boss will draw that card. Glare of Heresy. Beatdowns. That's a healthy amount of damage. There's a Plains. Tom not going to commit anything else to the board. Javis down to 13. Davis will draw. It's a copy of Flooded Strand. That's going to come into play. He's going to go down to 12. We may have the King of Oreskos here in just a moment, and we do. We'll head back the boss's way. Tom will draw a copy of Ordeal of Thassa. He'll start by casting that little scry action.
I love opening here too, because this ordeal is almost certainly good enough to warrant a negate if Jim has it, and then the coast is clear for your glare one way or the other. You either know it's good, or you get the negate out of his hand.
He's casting it now. There's a glare. Get that thing off the table. That'll work. Beatdowns, whole bunch of them. Trigger, draw 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points of damage. God's Willing in hand. There's an island and a passing of the turn back to Jim Davis.
Still no protection against and hostilities.
Up to 5. Elspeth.
That's no good.
Tom will look at his hand. Soldiers are going to come in. The boss is going to untap and draw. He'll show you a God's Willing on white.
What a comeback.
It's a trigger. It's a scry. It's an attack for lethal. Jim Davis's tournament is over. Tom Ross with white-blue heroic and a heck of a draw there in Game 3 takes down Jim Davis playing blue-white control. Jim Davis is out. The boss, after an 0-3 start, can still win this thing.
Don't tell me that Tom didn't earn this one. On the draw in perhaps the worst matchup of the other people who could have played against right now. Got destroyed Game 1. Not even close. Game 2 looked like it was much the same. Was able to brilliantly navigate his way around that Bramaz. Used his tricks perfectly. Did not fight over card drawers, even though Jace's Ingenuity and then especially Dig Through Time looked very dangerous.
I can't believe he didn't counter either one of those spells.
I mean, the Jace's Ingenuity, I was on the fence. The Dig Through Time, my spider senses were tingling.
Yeah, as were mine.
But Jim only found one live card off of it, which the Stubborn Denial was able to fight over. And then Game 3, we were talking about life totals, but didn't even get there. Tom was just able to win au naturel.
Congratulations to Tom Ross. He is still in this thing. For Jim Davis, it's a tough way to go. Coming off of a semifinals appearance at our Season 4 Invitational,